welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be tracing one of my favorite TV shows, Blackadder's family tree. And we're going to be tracing the lines of several main characters in this show. And if you don't know what Blackadder is, I'll provide a link down in the description for you guys to check out. But anyways, let's get started with Blackadder's side. So it starts with an individual named Edmund, who lived around 2500 BC. He's apparently a druid who oversaw the work of Stonehenge, and from him we move many generations down to an individual named Blackadder, who lived around 54 BC during the Iron Age, I believe, and apparently got exiled by the current queen at that time of or queen of his tribe, and then after that we move a couple generations down to Centurion Blackadder, who lived around 122 AD. He was a centurion stationed at Hadrian's Wall around the time of its construction. We move many generations down to Duke de Blackadder, who fought with William the Conqueror and was rewarded handsomely and given a mention in the Doomsday Book. This is all fictional, keep in mind. And from there we got 3 more generations down to Blackadder the Chicken Heart, obviously a play on Richard the Lionheart, King of England, in this case a chicken heart. Blackadder known to be quite a cowardly character. From him then to his son, Baron the Blackadder. And then 6 more generations down to a Blackadder descendant. Now this is where it kind of gets weird and questionable, because according to some of the trees I've looked at and some of the resources, he married some kind of unknown descendant of the Argyll House of Scotland, and they had a son named Donald MacAngus, who's the 3rd Duke of Argyll, and he apparently had some kind of relationship with Gertrude of Flanders, as revealed in the 2nd episode, and had a son named Edmund, who in this case is illegitimate, because Gertrude went on to marry Richard IV, alternate reality Richard, Duke of York, one of the murdered princes in the Tower. Long story, and they had a kid named Henry, Prince of Wales, and they all get murdered at the end of the series during the same year, if you were wondering why the same date of death for all of them. He marries an individual named Princess Leia of Hungary. She was just 8 years old, obviously one of those forced European marriages, but most likely for some kind of illegitimate prostitute, who knows. He had a son named Cardinal Blackadder, obviously became a cardinal and served under Henry VIII, somehow didn't get murdered, and lived into the time of Queen Elizabeth somehow. And he had 3 sons, those being Lord Nathaniel Whiteadder, Lord Edmund Blackadder I, and Osric Blackadder. And as for Lord Edmund Blackadder I, we traced the line further for Lord Edmund Blackadder II, protagonist in the 2nd series, 2 more generations down to Sir Edmund Blackadder, protagonist in Blackadder the Cavalier years, down to his son, Lord Blackadder, who is a party planner for Charles II, right over here, down to the Duke of Blackadder, down 2 more generations to the protagonist of the 3rd series, Edmund Blackadder Esquire, eventually King George IV of England. Long story short, he disguises as this guy gets killed, he becomes king. Presumably, a lot of the stuff is very much assumed, and he had, go down another generation to his kid, and his kid must have had 3 sons, going by the name of Lieutenant Edmund Blackadder, who is a famous military guy. Ebenezer Blackadder, protagonist in Blackadder: A Christmas Carol, and Elegant Eddie Blackadder. And from Ebenezer, we go down another generation to protagonist in the last series of Blackadder, Captain Edmund T. Blackadder, who served during World War I. He presumably had a son named Edmund T. Blackadder Jr., who was famous for killing something like 550 Nazis during World War II. And we go down a couple more generations to protagonist in Blackadder Back and Forth, Lord Blackadder V. Okay, so now we move on to the line of kind of his, in a way, sidekick, even though he punishes him severely on many occasions, that being Baldrick, played by Tony Robinson. So we start with Baldrick, who I believe is the only one in this Blackadder saga to actually have a higher class than this guy, and he was actually kind of the big man when it came to overseeing Stonehenge. You go many generations down to Legionary Baldrickus, living at the same time as him. He's a legionary, obviously, during Hadrian's Wall. Many more generations, finally down to an individual named Robin the Dungaver. And we know this individual because he mentioned his father was named Robin the Dungaver. He is the sidekick of Edmund, the protagonist in the first series, and go 2 more generations down to Elizabethan Baldrick. 2 more generations down to Civil War Baldrick, and many more generations down to Sawed-Off Baldrick, who apparently had an uncle, Baldrick, who was a second cod piece in Macbeth, and a cousin, Bert Baldrick. But then we move a generation down to Mr. Blackadder, who is kind of Ebenezer's sidekick. They all kind of line up in a way. There's, like he famously said, there's always a Blackadder and there's always a Baldrick in all of these series, and that rings true. Down to Private S. Baldrick, living in the same trench as him, and finally down to protagonist of Back and Forth, Private S. Baldrick. Actually, in this case, it's just S. Baldrick. And, okay, now we move on to the line of the Percys. Now, Percy really kind of started out as another main character in the first 2 series, but then he kind of got ousted, sort of, in favor of this individual, George, played by Hugh Laurie. This guy is played by Tim McInerney, though. And we start with Lord Percy, Duke of Northumberland. Go down 2 more generations, get to Lord Percy again. Down many generations on to what we can assume Lord Topper, who was half of the Scarlet Pimpernel, who was these famous people in the 3rd series, known for rescuing French aristocrats during the French Revolution. He mostly likely had some kind of cousins. And that brings us on to this other family, the Darlings, who are also played by Tim McInerney. That's why we can assume they're cousins. And these both come from Back and Forth. When they travel in the time machine, they meet both the Duke of Darling and the Duc de Darling. It's really Duke of Darling. Go many generations down to Captain Kevin Darling, also in this final series of Blackadder. And he, most likely a couple of generations down, had Archdeacon Darling, protagonist in Back and Forth. Also, just a side branch of this is Sir Osmond Darling Blackadder, from a funny commercial that they had for the Queen's birthday party, or special extravaganza, back in 2002, and so they had some whole little gag with Sir Osmond Darling Blackadder. And so we can assume some kind of cousin of both Blackadder and Darling. Moving up the line, we get to the Melchetts. And we start with General Melchett, also leaving at the same time, with the construction of Hadrian's Wall. Many, 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 many generations down to Lord Melchett, who is another main character in the second series of Blackadder. Down 2 more generations to Charles I, obviously King of England, so we put the actual birth and death dates, appearing in the Cavalier years, and then his son, Charles II, who appears in the same sketch as this Lord Blackadder. We go from him down to the Duke of Wellington, one of the most famous military leaders of his generation, down many other generations, to General Sir Anthony Melchett, from the final series of Blackadder, and many generations down to Archbishop Flavius Melchett, in the back and forth. And the final branch is the Georges. So we start with Consul Georges, at the same time as all these people, pretty self-explanatory. We move down from him to Prince Ludwig the Indestructible, who eventually murders all these individuals. That's why they all died in 1566. And from him we move down, somehow, to Prince George IV, Prince of Wales, who, like I mentioned, kind of got his title stolen by this Blackadder right here. Definitely one of the main characters in the third series, though. And from him we move to Lieutenant George in the final series of Blackadder, and down to Major George Buffton Tufton, also appearing in Back and Forth. And so I hope you enjoyed. It's very, very big family tree. Took me a long time to make, about 9 hours. And all the outcome's gonna be is a 12-minute video. Well, that's what the fruits of your labor get. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. If you want to read more about Blackadder, check the link in the description, and definitely also watch the series. One of my favorite all-time comedy shows. And thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.